Now that we have everything installed, it's time to actually use Webpack. And before we can do that, we have to configure it. So this is definitely the biggest pain, the most annoying part of Webpack, in my opinion, and as a teacher of Webpack, I just see a lot of people struggle with the configuration process, the syntax. Basically, we're going to make a file, which we can do right now, and we're going to call it webpack.config.js. Don't make it JSON. I see people do that sometimes. TypeScript config is JSON. Webpack config is JavaScript. And the syntax in here is basically we're going to use module.exports. So good old node module.exports. Just turn this down a little bit there. And we're going to have a bunch of settings in here. Things like entry point and module and rules and resolve and output. It gets a little bit annoying to remember. Annoying is the wrong term. It's hard to remember. But the good news is you just go to the docs. If you go to the TypeScript section on Webpack, they have an example, webpackconfig.js. So you can see what I'm talking about. It's not the most intuitive thing. You type it yourself from scratch. You can make mistakes pretty easily. We have to add some regular expressions in there. But again, we can just copy and paste. But I'm not going to copy and paste because I do want to talk about what's happening here and what each piece does. But if you just want to skip all this and copy and paste, you totally can do that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is set our entry point. So the entry point is telling Webpack where we want it to enter our application and start bundling. And for us right now, it is index.ts inside of our source directory. So that's what we're going to specify, right? We'll do ./source, and this is all relative to wherever our config file is. So ./source/index.ts. That's the easy part. Then we're going to add in this module property here, and then that will be an object that will have a rules property that will be an array, and we can add different rules. Now we're only going to have one, which is for TypeScript, but we could also have a rule for what to do when TypeScript or when Webpack encounters Sass files, regular JavaScript files, what to do when it encounters CSS files, static assets, but we're not worrying about that. We're just worrying about TypeScript. Okay, so let's go ahead and type that out. Module is an object, and then we have rules, which is an array. And then we're going to have our one rule in here, which tells TypeScript, if you see a file that ends in .ts and also TSX, which we haven't talked about, but that's JSX with TypeScript if you're going to do React with TypeScript. But for us, we really just care about TS. If that's the case, we want you to then use the TypeScript loader package that we just installed. So each rule follows this pattern. It's an object, right? And then it has a test property. And test is going to be a regular expression, which is one of those things that if you don't know is very confusing to look at. This is the one that you'll see on the docs. I'll explain what it is. So a regular expression is going to match a pattern. And in this case, there's a couple of symbols in here. This $sign means that this pattern has to come at the end of a file. And it either has to end in TS or optionally TS with an X. That question mark makes the X optional, and a TSX file we'll talk about, but it's React with TypeScript. So we're basically saying match a TS file or TSX, and that has to come at the end. So it can't be a file called, ZAR like that. It has to be something TS. So if that has been matched, if this is a regular expression that found a match, meaning it's a TypeScript file or a TSX file, then we're going to tell Webpack what to use. And we're going to use TS loader, which is what we downloaded earlier. And then there's one more thing we're going to say, exclude, and then another regular expression, node modules. We don't want you to touch the node modules directory because that has potentially a lot of TypeScript files inside of it. We don't want you to go and load all of those and compile them. So that's our basic rule. And we only have one rule, but we could have others if we had other loaders, if we were going to load CSS or Sass or CoffeeScript or something else. But this is the only one for now. And then we're going to add in the second piece, resolve. This goes after module, resolve, and then a list of extensions. I'll explain what that is in a little bit once we have things up and running. So I'm going to add resolve, and then that's an object, and then extensions. and then a list of file extensions that we want Webpack to be able to resolve. That includes .tsx if we're working with React and TypeScript in JSX files or TSX files, and then .js. Okay, we're almost there. Then we have this kind of nasty section where we have to talk about output, what we want Webpack to generate. This is the easy part. We want it to generate a bundle.js file, if that's the name that we want. So let's start there. Output, and then that will be an object. The file name of our output will be bundle.js. But then we have this path thing. And if you look at the docs here, it's using a method path.resolve, which comes from this path. It's a node package we can require. We don't actually have to install it, but this resolve method allows us to build a path name that is not going to be hard coded. So meaning we could run it from a different directory and it could still work. So that's why we use this here. We're saying make us a file called bundle.js and then put it inside of the dist folder inside of whatever our current directory name is. So it's going to resolve a path with this directory name. So this is __ dir name is a node thing, and then append it with dist. So we can just copy that in, to be honest. Put that there. Then we have to make sure that we require path. So const path equals require path. And that should be good, but it's very easy to make mistakes in this file. I do it all the time, which is why it's nice just to copy and paste. We can now go to our package.json and add a very simple script in here. We'll call it build that simply executes Webpack. And we can do that because we have Webpack CLI installed. And now if I were to try calling npm run build, we're going to get an error or two, but we should see Webpack trying to do something. And we do. It's trying, but it runs into some issues. And the first thing it's complaining about is that we actually have the file names with .js in all of our imports. If we look here, well, we're not importing anything. Here we go. This file, let's just close this a bit, has an import dog from dog.js. But Webpack is complaining about that because it's looking around. It only sees TS files. So it will add that extension for us. We need to remove all the extensions from all of our imports. I think there's at least one more. Shelter dog should only import dog. And I believe that's it now. Lodash is fine. Okay, so we'll save and we'll try this again. I'm going to do npm run build. And now we get another error. Now this error is an unexpected one. This one is basically saying it doesn't know how to handle a TS file. If you can read this here, it says you may need an appropriate loader to handle this file type. Currently, no loaders are configured to process this file. And this, I believe, is a typo I made. Yeah, over here in test, I'm supposed to have a dot there. I did warn you, it's very easy to make a mistake. If we look at the docs, right, they have a dot there. So we're matching files that end with .tsx. I didn't have the dot in there. So now we should try this again. It should know that I'm looking for .ts files. And this is good. We didn't get any errors. This is where I ran it right here. So we get a lot of output. We're going to get a warning saying mode has not been set. But if we look at our files here, we now should have a dist directory. This was all here before, so we can delete all that. But now we have a bundle file. Look at that thing. A little tough to read, but this is our bundle that has all the JavaScript and all dependencies. So Lodash is in here, included in the right order, and then it's all compressed down so that we can't make sense of it, but it loads faster. So again, let me just prove this. I'm going to delete everything in here. So delete from dist, and I'm going to run that command one more time, npm run build, which just executes Webpack. Webpack looks for a config file, and now we have our bundle file made for us. All right, so if we want to use this, which we probably do, we need to make sure that we link to it from within our index.html. So I'm going to do instead of dist/index.js, dist/bundle.js. And I don't need to make it a module anymore because it's a single bundled together file that includes everything. There's no imports and exports in there. All right. So now I'm going to run npm start because that's what runs my server, right? Webpack, so far at least, is only going to give us a bundle file. It builds it for us. And then we need to start a server to then go view that. Or technically, you could probably just open it on the file protocol. All right, npm start. Here's my live server. And we should see our beautiful console.logs, right? We're getting stuff from Lodash. Everything's working the same way it was before. That's really all that we care about. It's not beautiful, it's not exciting, but all these different TypeScript files that were connected and importing and exporting and sharing code have now been, first of all, compiled and bundled together into a single, very small bundle. You can see it in here. If we go to our sources, look inside of dist, bundle.js, look at that. Okay, so there's a couple problems. One is, how do we debug this? What if I need to, look at this bundle file and understand what's going on? I can't, right? Do you know what this does? I have no idea. So we're going to set up source maps, and then I want to work on the Webpack dev server. We're going to make mode set to development. We got some other things to take care of, but we at least have it set up.